Weirding Way Media.
Welcome to 80s TV Ladies, where we lift up the stories of women in television. Here are your hosts, Sharon+johnson and Susan+lambert+hatem. Welcome to 80s TV Ladies, where we look back in order not to lose our minds. I think that might be the one.
Yep.
Or where we celebrate the women and shows that helped shape our culture.
Before it burns to the ground.
Bury that. Bury it deep. Salt the earth. Before we take a sledgehammer to it and just beat it down.
Oh, God.
How was that?
That was great.
Okay.
Hello, I'm Susan, and I'm holding on to the idea that when the world never seems to be living up to your dreams, you're suddenly finding out the facts of life are all about you.
And I'm Sharon, and I believe it takes a lot to get them right, especially when you're learning the facts of life.
And that is right, Sharon. And today we get to interview a champion director for 80s TV and 77 episodes of The Facts of Life, Mr. Asaad Kelada. One of the things I'm thinking about every day, and when we record these podcasts, especially now, is how did we get here? And it's not just a tagline. I think we have to look back in order to leap forward. We have to know and often relearn the lessons of the past.
Talking about pop culture is talking about culture and what we want to consume in our lives and what we want to put out in the world.
I'm so impressed, Sharon. I've been so thrilled with the stories of those who worked in 80s television. And it's been such a gift to have this chance to interview icons of 70s, 80s, and 90s TV.
And I'm really fascinated by the female directors in particular that we've interviewed, the almost hidden female directors that we've talked to.
The hidden figures, as it were, of female directors.
Exactly. Like Mary Lou Belli and Nima Barnett and Gertrude+berg.
And it's been a treat to try and find people I only knew of by name. I'm not ultimately a quick names and dates kind of gal. I don't really, I couldn't pick out stars in a crowd. However, I am a sucker for interesting names. So today's guest is one of those names that even in the 80s stood out for me. Even before I was studying film and TV, I remember seeing interesting names that kept showing up on shows I liked. Names like Eugenie Ross-Leming and Brad Buckner, which isn't as interesting as Eugenie Ross-Leming, which is why I remembered her name and not his, Juanita Bartlett, and the man we're interviewing today, Asaad Kelada.
Mr. Kelada is a director from Cairo, Egypt, who emigrated to the United States to study at the renowned Yale School of Drama. And like you, Susan, was also one of the few names that I personally picked out because, as I think I've said before, I never really paid a lot of attention to the names on the screen. But his I remember.
Well, that may be because he directed over 340 episodes of television. His first television credits were on Rhoda and Phyllis in 1976.
He went on to direct episodes of The Tony Randall Show, Benson, WKRP in Cincinnati, One Day at a Time, Night Court, Valerie, 4 seasons of The Facts of Life, and over 100 episodes of Who's the Boss.
He directed well into the 2000s, including shows like Dharma and Greg, Sabrina the Teenage Witch, and even The Office.
What a special treat to have him with us in studio today. Welcome to 80s TV Ladies, Mr. Asaad Kelada.
Thank you so much. Pleasure to be here.
I'm so excited that you said yes and that you wanted to be in person. That's really a treat for us, and it's so delightful to meet you.
It gives us a chance in person to thank you for all the amazing television that you helped create that we still enjoy and laugh along with today?
Well, I must tell you, we forget when we're working day in and day out that we're actually connecting with people. It's work and we go and we forget. And so it is the most rewarding thing is to get that return voice and to know that we actually were, and the work still continues to speak to people and hopefully make their lives a little happier for a half hour or so.
I love that. And I almost don't know where to begin because you worked on so many amazing, like groundbreaking 70s, 80s, and 90s shows, worked with so many iconic 80s TV ladies, but I will start in the middle.
Okay.
I did really know where to start because we're doing a dive right now into the facts of life. So
Wonderful.
I would love to start with the facts of life and how you got involved in that show.
Well, the facts of life is one of the high points of my career and my life. It was, I was with the show for 4 years. I think back to it with nothing but joy being with that. I started on the facts of life. I was given one episode long before it became the facts of life as we know it. And I walked into the studio and it was like walking into a herd of untethered horses, ponies. The cast was made of 9. There were 9 young
It was when
girls.
it was the giant cast.
It was the giant cast, 9 girls. The headmaster, Charlotte Ray, was there. And it was really startling. I walked in. I remember one face that I recognized, and that was Kim Fields. Dear, dear Kim Fields, because I had done a pilot about maybe 6-7 months before, maybe a year before. And it was called Baby, I'm Back with Denise Nicholas and Demond Wilson. And their child, tiny, tiny child with pigtails, this adorable young person. And her character played the drums, which was, it was all very unique. She went from drums to roller skates, but
Yes.
anyway.
But it was little Kim Fields.
It was Kim Fields, and I adored her, and we got along so well. And so flash forward, when Facts of Life came, the only face I recognized and could relate to was Kim Fields. And that made it personal. And it was a wonderful reunion between the two of us. She'd grown up a bit, of course, from that time. So I had that one episode, and it was one of the more difficult logistical weeks because there were so many people. The rewrites were going on continuously. Every hour we'd get more pages. It was still finding its way, finding its voice. But the thing that I do remember is the title of the episode was Adoption.
Yes.
And Mindy Cohn had just realized, or she had just found out that she was adopted. And so the episode was about her trying to trace back where she came from and who she was and all of that, in the middle of all the comedy and hilarity and silliness and all of that. But it struck me that this was a topic that we hardly ever deal with things like that in sitcoms at that time. And so even though the show was still unfocused and the rewrites and coming down, and my shooting script came to me at 5:00 in the morning, the day of camera blocking. So I remember it for being a very kind of contradictory week, because on one hand, it was rigorous and difficult to get through, but it was very fulfilling because it was a sitcom that was trying to deal with something, to talk about something that was important. So we shot the show, everything went fine, and then about maybe a couple of months later, I got a call from my agent that they would like me to go back, and Facts of Life would like me to go back and direct a couple more episodes. So I said, do I want to go back
into the chaos?
Herding ponies? Or he said, no, the show has changed drastically. There are new producers, new take on the show. And so I think it's a good idea for you to do it. And I am forever grateful to him and for having had the foresight to say yes, because it was a turning point in my work, in my career, in my own kind of sense of relating to the work that I was doing on a more personal basis than just fighting to get a career going. Mm-hmm. And so I went back, and sure enough, I walked in and it was a different universe. Linda Marsh, Margie Peters had joined as co-runners of the show, executive producer with Jerry Mayer and Jack Ellenson. And everybody was so welcoming and receptive. And I remember they said that there was one new character being added to the show. Charlotte Ray was still there, but the headmaster was no longer there. So it was the 4 young girls and Charlotte Ray. And they said there's a new character, and the character's name is Joe Polniacek. And it was going to be played by Nancy McKeon.
Yes.
And our Nancy McKeon walked on stage, and we started to rehearse. And there was like an instant sense that there was a quantitative and qualitative thing that has changed. She was a young girl, beautiful, young, but she brought a poise and a presence and a maturity. And again, that episode, which was called Double Standard, was about a young girl from Eastman College. Who goes on a date and has to fight an attempted date rape. Mm-hmm. I said, man, this is really out of the norm. And we started to rehearse, and I went back to being in the theater. It was just like working on a play with substance, with humor, with intelligence. And yet they were young girls. So it was all very unique to me. This was television in a new form. So I remember the first on-camera blocking day when we started seeing those faces up close. And Nancy, I remember there was one scene when she came in, when she's talking to Blair about what it was like, and then her face, she had started having tears in her eyes and whatever, and there was a sense of kind of discovery that this is what the series is going to be about. It's going to be about young people with all their shenanigans and maneuvering and all of the silliness that takes place with that. But it was going to be about growing up, what it's like to grow up, and about friendship. Yeah. That's what struck me the most, is that it was what keeps these 5 people together in the middle of all of the sitcom-y behavior and all of that. It always ended up being, and at least that's what drew me to it, and that's what I tried to bring to it. It was all about the fabric that holds them together. And I think that is what was the through line in the series that kept it going, and that I think that has continued to resonate tonight. And so after those 2 episodes, I did the 2 episodes, and I had a wonderful time. And I said, God, I hope they like me. I hope I can come back. And then I got a call that they would like me to do the series. And then I was there.
And you did like 3 seasons.
I did 4 seasons.
You did 4 seasons.
I did all of the episodes, except maybe occasionally. No, I don't remember, but I think it was again during the 2022, 24 season.
Almost all of them.
I think all of them every year.
How do you prep and like
do post as well? Yeah.
It's a little different with sitcoms from our shows, because the prepping, I mean, it is arduous. That's why I said we forget in trying to just get a show done and then move on to the next show. I would edit the show. I'd go to the Monday morning, meet with the editor to look at the rough cut of last week's episode, give my notes, whatever, and then we'd move on. And then a couple of days later, I would very often forget what last week's episode was because you're immediately pulled into the new one.
The next thing.
So the prepping was more prepping the play itself, not prepping in terms of the hour shows and location shows where you actually have to go on location scouting and you have to
know the set,
production, all of that.
Right.
This is theater. It's theater that is shot for audience. It's theater and television combination. So the prepping that I would do, I would get the script. Occasionally, I would get it maybe Sunday night before Monday morning, or I would, if I'm lucky, it was ahead of its schedule, we'd get it on a day later or so, but never before Friday night at the end of the show that was just shot. Then, if everything was running according to plan, then there would be next week's script. So I would spend the weekend working on the play. What it's about, how we want to do it, what's funny, what needs to be done, what notes I can give the writers for playwrights. We'd start Monday morning, have a table read, and then we'd be on our way.
Were the writers pretty much on schedule? In other words, making sure that you had the script done Friday night?
The first third of the season was always the easiest part because there was hiatus and they worked during that time to have seasons prepared in advance. As the season went on, it was palpable. You could begin to see the tension, feel the tension in the air. And deadlines were approaching. They were closer. And then it was almost writing a week ahead of time. And during drastic times, rarely happened, but there would be on occasion time to have to shut down so that if a script was problematic, then take a break and get it fixed over the week. But they were remarkable. That Linda and Margie were absolutely extraordinary in not only what they brought to the show in terms of substance and guidance and the sense of direction of what the show is about, but their efficiency in getting scripts out. And we lose sight of what that demands of the writer's room. It's really a skill that is unique to itself because it is telling stories and coming up with ideas and making it funny. But there are rules to be followed. It's all prescribed in a way. And to have to somehow meet all of those demands week in and week out and week in and week out is extraordinary. My respect for writers is endless, as it is for the actors who then do the same thing. They shoot a show, then they come in on Monday. They have to clear the slate, get in all the other
it's
material.
A new play
It's a new play every week. That's how I saw it. I mean, that's how I ended up doing sitcoms with my background in the theater. And that's what I loved. So you're starting fresh every week.
I always think of network television production in particular as a runaway train. The train starts at the beginning of the season. At first, it's not kind of going at a nice clip, but comfortable. But then it starts picking up speed as you go.
That is the exact analogy that I've used with myself when I was just a guest director on shows, which is a very difficult place to be in. Exciting, difficult, frightening, rewarding, because the show has been going. It's running. Everybody's on that train, and then the director comes in, and you have to hop onto that runaway train in a matter literally of minutes, sometimes when the day begins, to somehow assimilate and be accepted and be the leader. And at the same time, you're the guest. And so it's a combination of a lot of things. But the runaway train is exactly how I saw that. And when the show is well run, well written, well performed, that train is just a speed train. Without any problems. It's a turbo train.
It's a turbo train. Okay, before we move on from the facts of life, because we could stay on this the whole time, but in that first episode with the 9 cast members, one of them was Molly Ringwald. Was she in the episode?
Yes, she was in the episode, and she was a standout for many reasons. And I realized, because I remember when we were shooting the show, we were on camera, there was something, when she was on camera, it was difficult to know where she's focusing. There was a phenomenon there, and we talked about it. And I was told that she had some issues with eyes.
With her eyes.
That were pretty serious. It was never, ever evident when we were working, and she was just fluent and remarkable. But this was, to me, again, it said, these are young people. How do they cope with all of these challenges and not make it? And they're still there, and she was lovely to look at. She was very good in the show, and actually, I was surprised when the show came back. I looked for her, and she was gone. And then, of course, her career took off on a completely.
She seemed to do okay after that. Yeah,
she did very well. Yes,
and working with Charlotte Rae, I mean, she was obviously an incredibly experienced actress.
Yes,
how was that?
A joy. She and I were the grown-ups in the room. And so we were colleagues, but we were parents, and we were kind of the anchors that kept the show steady. But Charlotte was needlessly, I mean, it's common knowledge how brilliant she was to be. She was funny, she was quirky, she was quick and lovely to work with, but also it was a bit difficult because she was there as the centerpiece in the show, but the show was about the four girls.
Yes.
And so that had to be a balance in the writing, a balance in how we worked together. There was never an issue on the set of who's getting the attention or what this particular episode was about, but it was a delicate balance. I just was aware of it intuitively.
As the show.
That's something to be protected. That also right. Charlotte's role, her position on that show was complex in a way. She was really in a way, even though we're always talking about the four young characters, Charlotte really was the anchor. Mm-hmm. Without her, if you try to think of the facts of life without Mrs. Garrett, I think it would take off. It would fly into the atmosphere. It wouldn't have any ballast to it. And she was that. The thing that as a footnote to all that, to what we're talking about, is that the facts of life was very, very popular and has continued to be kind of an iconic television presence mm-hmm. in television history. But while we were doing the show, it was not really taken that seriously within the industry. The audience adored it, but within the industry, it was an 8:00 show. And actually, there were some jokes about the moral at the end of each episode, that there has to be a lesson. And people said, if you want a lesson, send Western Union or some jokes like that. But this dichotomy also was kind of revelatory to me, that the way we tend to look at things from the inside is very different from what the world out large is seeing, because this show was an important part of the week experience for millions of people. It's one of the experiences I'm most proud of, working on that show, being part of forming it and shaping it, because it was maybe the first, I think Double Standard was maybe the first episode that was shot in that new format. Mm-hmm. So the role that I played with Linda and Margie and the cast and everybody else was, we all put that show together, gave it its identity and gave it its shape and form. And I'm inordinately proud of that.
It is sort of, you definitely see the difference in the first season and such, and then the next.
Yes.
The reboot, even though it's not it's a reboot.
Yeah.
But it's so interesting how resonant that show weirdly is.
It's phenomenal.
Because it's about female friendship, which you don't get an awful lot of. And certainly not in the 80s, like where it really is real characters building an ongoing life together. Mm-hmm. So long that they had to make up reasons for them to stay.
Exactly.
Like it was like, you got to be kidding me. Aren't they supposed to be?
Don't they graduate?
Do they never leave the school? But I don't know. It's very iconic. And it's weird that is a show that again, I remember it feeling like, oh, that's the kids show. That's the family show. That's the, the girls show. And that's the show people remember. And I really still watch it.
I think that it's because we made a very conscious effort. I know that's the only way I could work on all the shows that I did. But with the Facts of Life, it was always about something more than a series of funny lines, funny business, charming, delightful young people having a good... It was all of that, but at the core of it, each episode was about something that they either learn or that they are exposed to, that changes. And with the way we worked is at the beginning of every week, we'd have the table read. And then after everybody left and I was alone with the cast, we sat around the table and we just talked every single week. And I said, okay, let's just talk about what this episode is dealing with. What is it about? Why does scene 1 relate to scene A, relate to scene C? And so that they were always grounded on something more than just the individual scene or my line or this. There was a connection to something that this is all tying together to something that will fall in place by the end of the show.
There was a reality.
A reality to what they were doing, because it could have very easily turned into just chaos, because that's that. I mean, I remember there was a show that literally was about chaos where they're repainting one of the room or something, and they're all throwing paint around and they're stuff. I mean, it was that, but then there was always a moment when you pull all of that together and say, yeah, but what was behind all of the stuff that we did? So I think that may be one of the reasons why it has lasted. When all is said and done, they're actually talking to each other. They're actually finding something about one another that they may not have known.
Yeah.
We have to take a break.
We have so much to ask Mr. Kelada.
Stay tuned. There's so much more to come.
We haven't even asked about Cloris Leachman. Welcome back. It's pretty incredible. So you enjoyed working with the girls too, and Kim Fields.
Loved enjoying with them and loved being with them. And whenever I run into any of them right now, it just warms my heart to see them. Young women with families. I say, my
like
God, I must be Noah. How old am I?
I must be Noah. Is that what you just said? I love that. And any guest stars that came through during that? I mean, there were a lot, but that you remember as standouts. I'm trying to remember.
Now, George Clooney was not in my time.
You didn't get the George curling.
Everybody said, tell us about George Clooney. And I say, damn, I didn't. I can't. I wasn't there then.
But I know you worked with Jerry Jewell.
Yes, that's what, yes.
Am I pronouncing that correct, Jerry?
The first episode that she did on television, I directed that, and I remember, and that was landmark.
And she was the first person with a disability to be cast in a primetime network series.
She was. Norman Lear had seen her do her stand-up act, and he was completely taken by what he watched, what he saw, and he went to the producers and said, she is the one to start to be the trailblazer. And so she was cast to play Cousin Jerry in an episode that was called Cousin Jerry. And I remember that week was, again, an important learning moment for me, working with Jerry, because I was a bit anxious. How should I make it easy for her? That's all my thinking. How should I talk to her? How should I help her play the role and all of that without crossing a line? It was all about being cognizant of whatever it is that she may be or will be dealing with. I remember in the middle of rehearsal, we were rehearsing, and then she took me aside. And she said, I want to tell you something. You can talk to me like anybody else. I am like anybody else, except my body doesn't respond to me when I want it to sometimes. And then she said a joke to everybody. She said, you know, the thing that people loved, I invited people for dinner. The thing they loved best was my salad because I was so good at tossing. And she said, so anyway, relax. I can do anything you ask me to, whatever. And I realized that I was spending all my time trying to make her feel better when she was trying to make me relax and be okay, that she is okay. And it was a lesson that very often we make assumptions about others when we should be looking to our own sensibilities and behavior. So anyway, she made her mark. She was returned several times. She and I remained very, very close. We met frequently after I left the show, and when she had her book published, I went to see it when she Norman Lear was awarding her a special award. She invited me. So she is an extraordinary human being. I mean, she's courageous and talented and is herself, and she went through life being Jerry Jewell.
Yeah. I mean, I remember when she came on the show when I was younger, and that feeling groundbreaking. I didn't know it was actually that groundbreaking until we went back to start looking at the show.
There has never been anyone before that.
Yeah. And kind of amazing. And her career has been kind of amazing.
Yes.
She has continued to represent in a really fabulous and sort of, I remember her stand up. I remember that it was okay, right? It was like, I'm okay.
Exactly.
And you need to just, it's okay.
That was her message to us, is that, okay, get used to this. Get used to the exterior for a moment or two, and then let's all get past it.
Yes.
There's something else going on, which is a valuable life lesson.
I would imagine that Facts of Life was the first time you worked with so many young people, whether it be in theater or in television at one time. And I just wonder if there were things you learned or that you...
Yes, it was. I mean, I have worked with, as I said, there was this pilot with Kim Fields as a young... I'd worked with young people. While I was doing Facts of Life, I directed the pilot for Family Ties. Again, a family situation. But it is certainly the longest stretch that I worked consistently, continuously with young actors. And I learned that there is something obviously to be taken into account with that. There is a language that has to be spoken and a methodology maybe to get the best out of them. But fortunately, I found myself never ever talking down to them. I just talked to them as intelligent, talented young people who just needed to be spoken to clearly and in a vocabulary and in a methodology that just intuitively I felt would work for them. And so it evolved over time because they were getting older. As we went, I saw them grow up on the screen, on television. They were growing up from young girls to young women. And the thing that I am fortunate to have had, I suppose, is that I think the thing I find easiest is working with actors, working with people. That's been part of the theater training and just part of what I think I bring to the table. I've never felt as secure with the technology or with lenses or whatever, but it was always about what we are trying to express and communicate and how to bring the best out of the people I'm working with. And working with people who are that young for a cast that is predominantly not even teenagers yet. It was, I had to stop and pay attention to that. I couldn't just go in and direct. I was the director. I was the mentor. I was the father. I was the confidant. We'd talk a lot and privately if there was anything going on, because it was all part of the package. It's not just about come say your lines and leave. For me, it was about the totality of it, that they had to feel safe. That was the main thing, is that they had to feel safe on that set, and they had to be treated safely. And so they developed their confidence, and they were remarkable young women. I mean, when we started, they worked for 20 minutes on set, and then they had to leave for 20 minutes and meet with their set tutor, their teacher. And then I would work while they're gone with their stand-ins, give them the notes, stage the scenes, give them the notes. Then they would communicate these to the actors when they came back. And it was just astonishing how in minutes they absorbed all of that and then made it their own. And they continued. So it was reciprocal. I learned from them and they taught me.
Fantastic.
That is amazing. All right. And then you ended up directing the Facts of Life Goes to Paris TV movie. How did that happen and how was that experience?
Well, they were talking about they were going to do a movie, and it was going to be shot in Paris, and I was the series director. So I lobbied hard to do it, even though I had never, ever directed a single frame of a single camera show. It was all multiple camera. But hey, I can do it.
You can do it.
Just put me there. So fortunately, they said, okay, we'll do it. And it was a trial by fire because every single shot of that movie was on location. There was not a single frame that was shot on a set. We shot a few days, maybe a week in Los Angeles. And then we flew to Paris. I had flown there beforehand to meet. I was coming back actually from a visit with my family in Egypt. And then I stopped in Paris, met with the French production manager. We scouted locations and whatever. It eased a bit of the tension in that I could speak a little bit of French, which is a little better now than it was then. But so I spoke to him in French, and I said, okay, this may work. But I was terrified, to be truthful. I had never done this. We had a director of photography who was an American, a local DP, and the assistant director. So the essential crew people were from here. Everybody else was a French crew. So when we went to Paris, I was the liaison between the American producers who were there. Linda and Margie and Jack and Jerry went to France. And it was very, very exciting. I mean, the first day I remember, okay, what will be the first words I say to these people? I've never done it. And they're a French crew. Very kind of the French, they have to study you and decide whether they're going to accept you.
Whether you're worthy.
Or not, whether you're worthy. Exactly. So fortunately, my name was Asaad Kelada. I was not John, whatever. So I was already maybe in between.
Yes.
And again, I developed a very good relationship with them, and they accepted me as one of their own. So that made it a lot easier. The DP was extraordinary. He was very, very helpful, always by my side, never overstepped the fact that I didn't have the experience, nowhere near what he had, but always supportive and just this and this. And as it went on, I found it liberating. It was wonderful. You can put the camera anywhere. You see people. We're at Notre Dame. We're at the Sacré-Cœur. We're at the Champs-Élysées. I mean, how can this be called a job? So it was a wonderful experience. I look at it now and I say, oh, it's so primitive. I could have done so much better. And clearly it was my first go at it, but it worked. It aired. People were happy with it. And it was a fantastic opportunity. I've been very lucky that opportunities led to other opportunities, and I tried to make the most of each.
That's amazing. Now, I just want to note that the first episode of Rhoda that you directed was entitled what?
Rhoda questions her life and goes to Paris. There we go.
Any relation?
I was the only common
You're
denominator.
the only conqueror. All right, I just
I
wanted to check.
yeah.
You went to Paris. Did you
I
get to
went
go to Paris for that one?
No, no. Rhoda went to Paris. We stayed here.
I thought maybe, the Paris guy. We got to get the Paris guy.
I wish.
So I do want to go back to your beginnings.
Okay.
I read somewhere that you started as a singer in a rock and roll band.
Yes, as a teenager, I was the lead singer of the band that introduced rock and roll to Egypt.
Wow.
I was a kid. I was just doing whatever came along. Music was always part of my life and my family and so forth. But just very quickly how that evolved is that I was part of a huge variety show, the first of its kind in Egypt with my cousin and other people. We did we did one performance, and the next day, the war, the Suez Crisis, 1956, took place. So Egypt was under attack, and so the show stopped. All the instruments were sent. We had a big basement at our home. We all thought this was going to be a few days, and then we'll get back. Well, it wasn't. It was a long, troubled time. Anyway, during that time, while we were in the basement, my cousin and other friends, they came over and we would just play with the instruments, pass the time. Universities were closed, jobs were closed. The country was at a standstill. So nobody had anything to do. So we were passing our time that way, and my parents would come down and bring us pop sodas and whatever. And then one day a friend came and said, "We found this album that you should listen to. It's really new music. It's exciting. Maybe you can play that stuff." It was Bill Haley, Rock Around the Clock. Bill Haley and the Comets. So we listened to the vinyl disc and loved it. We spent the next few weeks just copying every single note. We were all amateurs. None of us, my cousin was the only musician with any experience. I just played the guitar and I sang. I taught myself, and I was doing it on my own before that. And so we all just picked it by ear and copied every single cut, and they were pretty good. And then we had a kind of a concert to introduce ourselves. We became a band. To make a long story short, we became a band.
What was your name?
And said, okay, Bill Haley and the Comets. What can we call this? My cousin's name was Mike. He was an aeronautical engineer, and he had he was studying at the time a new something, rocket, whatever, that was called the Skyrocket. So we said, Mike and the Skyrockets. So Mike and the Skyrockets, in tribute to Bill Haley and the Comets, became an entity. And we started to perform first just rock and roll. And we got our first engagement playing at a New Year's Eve party at one of the top kind of country clubs in Cairo, the 1956-57 New Year's Eve. And then after a while, it caught on, and we became the top band in the country. But there was nobody else playing the music we played. It grew from rock and roll to international music. We were all multilingual, and it became a big deal. It was we had our own club that was built for us, and we starred in that, and it was sold out every night for a couple of years. And then I got an unexpected admission to Yale University, to the School of Drama, and I left Egypt in 4 weeks. Left it all and came here, and another journey began.
And you broke up the band?
Well, they continued. You know, I didn't think I was going to leave because I didn't have a visa, I didn't have a passport, whatever. This all came so unexpectedly. We were really at the top of the game, and it was extremely difficult to decide, do I give all that up? But then there's Yale University, and there's a whole other opening to a life that I may not ever have access to. And so I didn't think that I could make it in time, frankly, because I literally had to leave in 4 weeks. When I got the admission letter, it was going to be 4 weeks later that I'd meet with my advisor. So I said, okay, it's not going to happen. I'm not going to tell the band. And so I continued to play every night while going with my father to get the paperwork. All of a sudden, it all happened. I got my visa. I got my passport. I had to tell them. It was very, very hard. They continued to play for a couple of years after that. So they replaced
you.
They replaced me. It was never as good, I'll tell you.
I believe that. How amazing. And were you singing those songs in English or
English.
Egyptian?
It was Bill Haley and the Comets translated by Mike and the Skyrockets.
But then when you did other songs, you did multiple languages.
Well, we all sang in multi-languages. I mean, I sang in English. There was another member of the band who sang in French, a third one who sang in Italian. We all did harmony work in all of these languages. And I listen to it now. I have a couple of tapes and CDs, and it was really quite sophisticated. It was remarkable how we all did that as amateurs, as a hobby. And then it became a major ongoing thing. And it was the beginning of the path for me, because then it just opened up my passion, I guess, for entertainment, for being in this world. And I thought that I would continue when I came to the States, that this would be my secret agenda, was that I was going to become Paul Anka.
Nice.
I mean, he's Lebanese, I'm Egyptian, what the hell? Okay. He was 16, I was 16.
I was going to say, how old were you at
16. When the band began.
The band took off. And then how old were you?
16 to 20.
To 20.
I was singing with the band. And I'm embarrassed saying that, but I was a celebrity. It was a big deal.
You were like a boy band. You were an Egyptian boy band.
Egyptian boy band. Okay.
That's awesome.
Asaad Styles. And I made a couple of films. I was kind of discovered by one of the top Egyptian films. Yes.
Are they? Can you see them?
You can.
Do we have a name? Is it like the Egyptian head?
Right. They were. He was one of the top film directors in Egypt. He was given the 50th anniversary Lifetime Achievement Award at Cannes. He became my mentor for my life. We were friends, and I was his protege. He was my mentor for 55 years until he passed away. And I was there a couple of weeks before. So anyway, that also was an outgrowth of the band. He came to where we were playing one night, which was dazzling that he would be coming to listen to us play. It was very early in our history. We had just started getting engagements. We were playing at the Nile Hilton Terrace.
The Nile
Hilton. I'm giving you very exotic stuff here.
This is 1956.
This was 1956,
The Nile
56.
Hilton.
The Nile
That's
Hilton.
amazing.
Beautiful. We were on the rooftop terrace overlooking the Nile, and we played from 6 to 8 before going to another club to play the nighttime shift at the Auberge de Pyramide next to the pyramids. And the Cairo would start glimmering, the lights would come up. I mean, it was really magical. Wow. And I was just 16, 17, 18, taking all this in. And so Yusuf Shaheen came to the club, and he, during a break, the maître d' came to me and he said, Mr. Shaheen would like to talk to you. I said, are you talking to me? And anyway, and then I walked to him and he said, would you like to be in the movies? And I said, I'm sorry. He said, would you like to be in the movies? Which I would like you to be in my next film. Come tomorrow to my office and we'll talk. And so it was a small part, but featured with a little dialogue, but it had a lot to do with the main character. So anyway, I did that. And then there was another bigger role in another of his films a year later. And so that started me on this path. And then I came to America not knowing what it would lead. The last thing I expected was that I would be directing comedy on television, but
you've done a little bit of everything along the way.
It was, again, one step leads to the next.
Was it your expectation then, after all of that and doing the 2 movies, that when you went to Yale, you would study to be a performer?
My secret agenda, again, was that I was still continuing in music, because I knew nothing about directing. He advised me when I got the admission. And he told me before that, he said, the way Yale came up is I met with somebody who was working at Yale, a professor or something. And I said, what do you think I should do with my life after this, whatever? I hear Yale has a school of drama. He said, yeah, but it's extremely difficult to get in. They take a handful every year. Write them a letter. Tell them what you want to do. I talked to Joe Shaheen, and he said, write to them and tell them you want to be a director. I said, I don't know anything about directing. I'm a singer. I'm Paul Anka. And he said, it will give you a foundation for anything you want to do after that. If you study directing, you will be what directing is, but you'll know how to talk to actors. You'll know what goes into a production. Just do that. I said, okay.
So how long after you got to Yale did you realize, okay, this directing is what I want to do? I don't necessarily want to be a performer.
About a year and a half later, I was completely lost when I first arrived. First of all, I arrived in February because I left in the middle of the year.
Right.
I had no idea. They didn't tell me. I told them I need to leave quickly. It was getting harder to get a visa in Egypt and all of that. So they said, okay, come. 4 weeks later, it was the middle of the year. I got there in the second semester. And these are all interactive courses. Everything is dependent on what came before. So I was 4 months late. Everybody else was doing stuff. They had their cliques, their friends, their groups, whatever. I was this strange little person coming in with an odd name and knew nothing about directing or what to do. And so, again, this is another long story. By the way, I just finished writing my memoir, so all of this is in there.
Okay, good.
Hopefully it will be out. You can go in more detail there.
Can't wait to read it.
So anyway, I had to drop out. Spent 6 months in New York on my own with no money, another story. Then went back to Yale the following fall and started to get my bearings. And about a year or so after I was there the second time, there was one particular exercise we were given, and I did it. And it was the most personal thing so far, because it was not to use any play, not to use any dialogue, not to do anything, but still to present a scene. So it all had to be created. And for the first time, it was something visceral. It was all about what you see, what you hear, how you group people. I read a play that inspired me, a play called Luther, about Martin Luther. And so I created a ritual, whatever, and I said, I used music that they were chanting, and I said, this has everything that I love. I love to read. I can read and research and do. There's music. I can use music to stir people, but without having to see if my voice will crack. And so this is when I said maybe. And by the time I graduated, I knew that this was the voice. How it was going to be expressed, though, I had no idea. Because I graduated and I sent 200 letters to get a job. There was no way to stay in the country unless I got a job with an employer who was going to file for me to get my green card, whatever. And the only job was teaching. I mean, I couldn't go as a freelance director, go to Broadway or to this and that. Nobody's going to say that we need him apart and from anybody else. So I got one job teaching at Antioch College, and they filed on behalf of me to get my...
So you got to stay.
And so I got that, but the point is I did not know where I was going or how I was going to express myself in terms of an ongoing career. I was started to direct plays in a college environment, and I loved the process. I knew this is what I wanted to do. I was introduced to teaching. I loved teaching and the interaction with students and feeling I was making a difference that way. But it was all, I'm still kind of in limbo. I'm still in a process trying to find my way. I taught at Antioch for 4 years. Then came to San Diego I got another job that felt a little bit more professional. It was in a school of professional arts, performing arts. And I was head of the directing department, and I was closer to Los Angeles, and I was in California where the sun was shining as opposed to snow in Ohio. And so I said, okay, this is getting me closer. The next part is I moved to Los Angeles, and then it all began. Another whole journey began.
That's amazing.
So
And that whole journey involved Rhoda and Phyllis and Mary Tyler Moore?
To get to Rhoda, the only directive I was given or suggestion is, a friend of mine said, there's a company called MTM. They're producing shows that are very similar to theater. You have theater background. I had no knowledge of film at all. I didn't know anything. So they said, why don't you talk to them? Because these shows are filmed in front of an audience. They're staged like a play. Why don't you talk to them? So I met one of the people at MTM, and they said, yeah, we're doing these shows. I said, well, what would it take? How can I get a directing job? He said, well, you can't get a directing job. The only thing we can offer you is if you want, you can come and sit in the bleachers and watch the shows being rehearsed and shot. And then the rest is on your own. You just sit there. If you want to, you can meet people, you can learn about the process. So by that time, I was struggling because as a freelance director, I was not, as you said, broke a lot of the time. So I said, well, okay, this could be my new path. So I said, okay, I'll do it. I said, maybe it'll take a few months. Okay, I can. Well, that ended up being 5 years. I was at MTM in the bleachers, sitting every day. I started watching first. It was all the shows, whatever show I could get in. But I was under no formal auspices. So I was really just on my own. It was not that, okay, this is Asaad Kelada. He's here as an observer. So they said the door is open. Walk, nobody will kick you out. So I sat there as an alien in the dark, watching the Mary Tyler Moore show, the Bob Newhart show, whatever I could. Year after year, nothing happened.
And did you meet people there? Or?
I was never good at kind of glad-handing and going and saying, "Hi, I'm Asaad Kelada." We were talking about this in the car coming here. I'm still not good at it. I mean, people saw this face with the dark eye, with sitting in the, who is this presence? And I met a few people, but I didn't meet anybody who mattered. Because I'd go to the people who talked to me, and the people who talked to me were the gaffer, the this, the that, people who were, I don't know, not of the hierarchy. So anyway, finally, after 2 years, I decided to focus on one show. And that's when Rhoda was a spin-off of the Mary Tyler Moore show. So I made Rhoda my focus. And I went there every day. I had a friend who was on Rhoda, Beverly Sanders, who had a recurring role. And she introduced me to Valerie. And so there was the beginning of personal connections. So I went and spent my time on Rhoda for 2 years more. That was now 4 years. There was nothing happening. At the time, I would leave. I would maybe do a play somewhere, whatever.
Were you still teaching or freelance?
Wherever I could,
Whatever
yes.
You could.
But I was not under contract because I wanted to focus on this thing. So this was really the most difficult stretch of this whole journey because more than anything, not even the logistics of surviving, but the sense of feeling that I was completely disappearing. I was invisible after I had been
so visible.
A star when I was 16. And I was literally invisible. I mean, people just walked past me. And if I met somebody socially and they said, okay, how are you? What are you doing? If I didn't say I just came off a show or whatever, they literally walked past me. So this was the biggest challenge of all. How do I maintain my own sense of self? It's not a sob story. It is just this is the process. It was the reality. And I had to decide, over and over, make a new decision. It's my choice. I mean, I could choose to, this is not the only way people live. And so I had to choose, and I chose to continue. So this was my choice. It's nobody else's responsibility but mine. Finally, Valerie called me one day and she said she was doing a play during hiatus with an actor named Anthony Zerbe, who was very, very successful as a character actor, wonderful man. And she asked me if I would want to direct it. It was at the Seattle Rep, which was a very well-established theater. So I said, of course. I directed the play. This was after my third year watching. And then I said, okay, the play went well. Valerie was very happy. I said, okay, now she knows what I can do. This is now firsthand. So I went back to observe, and
this is such a wonderful story on so many levels, not the least of which the perseverance that it took. And
that's the only reason why I actually talk about it. It's not the grandiosity of saying, see what I did and how I came from and where I came from and all of that. It's because it's a practical, almost step-by-step thing. It doesn't always have to happen that way, because when I started to direct and was successful, there were other directors, would-be, wannabe directors, who came and observed me, and I made it possible for them because I know how much it meant to me. And they would come for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and say, I don't need this. I can't do this. Or they would give me notes. It was the other thing, where directors who were observing me say, why don't you use this shot instead of that? I said, you've got a long way to go, my friend.
You go sit up there and be invisible for a while.
Exactly. So I directed the play, and then I went back to Rhoda the following season saying, okay, this is bound to be the break I've been waiting for. This was the 4th season. The list came down with the directors and the shows, and my name was not on it. And so I really began to despair and said, there may be something illogical about it. The only option I had left, I said, I will try to do what is against my nature. I contacted Grant Tinker, who was Mary Tyler Moore's husband, and he founded MTM, and an extraordinary, unique man in terms of who his person is and what he's done to the business. So I called and said, maybe I can make an appointment. His secretary called back and said, Mr. Tinker will want to see you. I went and talked to him, and I told him my story. And I said, I don't know if maybe this is not for me. What do you think I should do? He said, I've heard about you. I've known that you were here, and I haven't heard of anybody who's done what you've done. Hang on. You're doing the right thing. Just hang on for a little more. Try to meet people, try to talk to them. Rhoda is a good show to be on. It's young, it is successful. So anyway, he encouraged me, and I felt he was seeing me when I was feeling so invisible. There's this man who is the head of the company, a big, big shaker and mover. He took the time to meet with me, to talk to me. There may be something he's seeing I'm losing sight of. So I went back, stayed till the end of the season, and then the next year, the 5th year, about halfway through the season, I got a call that they wanted me to direct an episode. And that was Rhoda Goes to Paris. And an interesting footnote to that episode is that one of the people I did connect with when I was observing Rhoda was a writer named Michael Leeson, who's brilliant, and he's gone on to do a lot of wonderful stuff. Anyway, he was one of the few people who actually acknowledged me. He would say, good morning, how are you doing, whatever. When I got Rhoda Goes to Paris, the day we had our table reading, Michael Leeson came to me and he said, I want you to know something. This script is he wrote it. He wrote Rhoda Goes to Paris, Questions of Life. Anyway, he said, I just want you to know that this is one of my favorite scripts, and I've been holding on to it, keeping it, hoping you would direct it.
Wow. Oh.
I didn't know what to say. I mean, it just moves me today that he saw something by my sitting there, whatever. I don't know what it prompted, but anyway, the fact that this would be the episode that I would launch my career with, would be my debut. And so I directed the episode, and that night, Alan Burns came to me and he said, this was a really auspicious debut. We have 2 more episodes we'd like you to do that are still uncommitted.
So you got that right off the bat.
So I got the first one and then 2 more for that season. Then I thought I was home free, and then there was utter silence for a couple of years.
For real.
Yeah, but anyway, that's the story we all know. There's always editing.
Well, but it is, as I said earlier, the perseverance and the fact that there is no one, first of all, there's no one way to do this career that you've been so successful at, but it also isn't something that's probably going to happen to everybody overnight, where you're going to walk in and everybody's going to acknowledge your greatness and say, please come in to show business. And no, it takes time. It takes a little bit of luck, but it can take time, and you have to want it, and you have to persevere.
I think you have to be ready when the time comes. During that whole time, I wasn't just sitting. I was doing my homework. I read countless books. I watched television shows and compared what I was seeing on the set with what is here. I was going to school, and I was going to the best school I could possibly go to, watching James L. Brooks, watching Alan Burns, and those writers and producers and editors they were the cream of the crop at MTM at that point. You have to be ready.
Right.
Because the pressure that I felt when I got that one episode is that, okay, I've been sitting here for 5 years. I have literally 5 days to demonstrate whether
you can do this.
Well, first of all, I learned anything, whether I'm worth putting any more investment in or whatever. And it is unbearable pressure until we started rehearsal. And then something else happened. I was just doing the work.
Did it feel like home?
It felt like home.
Okay, we have so much to talk about with Asaad Kelada. This has to be a 2-parter episode.
So keep your eye out for the rest of this incredible conversation. Next time we come back, you'll be able to hear part 2. Just trust me, you're going to want to hear part 2. Please send us your thoughts at 80stvladies.com on our website, or email us at 80stvladies@gmail.com. As always, we hope 80s TV Ladies brings you joy and laughter and lots of fabulous new and old shows to watch, all of which will lead us forward toward being amazing ladies of the 21st century.